The unfamiliar image, a punching Jesus.
Have you ever imagined Jesus throwing a punch? We usually remember Jesus as a symbol of peace, a gentle and compassionate figure who embraces everyone. However, in the 14th century, the genius artist Giotto di Bondone, who opened the curtains of the Italian Renaissance, shatters this familiar image. In his masterpiece within the Scrovegni Chapel, Giotto presents a scene that stops us in our tracks. At the tip of his brush, Jesus is not holding a whip. Instead, he clenches a fist full of rage. Why did Giotto have to depict the savior of humanity in such a violent manner? Where exactly was that fist aimed?
The Scrovegni Chapel, buying salvation with blood money.
To understand this fist, we must first look at the place where it was painted. In Padua, Italy, stands the Scrovegni Chapel. Paradoxically, this beautiful and magnificent space began with a profound fear of hell. The owner of the chapel, Enrico Scrovegni, came from a family of notorious moneylenders. His father, Reynaldo, was so much a symbol of greed that his friend Dante Alighieri depicted him in the Inferno, the first part of the Divine Comedy. Dante described the usurers of Florence with such vivid disdain that everyone knew who he was talking about when he mentioned the crest of a blue sow on a white pouch. Enrico was anxious. He lived under the shadow of his father's sins and his own moral compromise. He wanted to wash away this stain and buy his way into heaven. He used his immense wealth to bribe the Pope for indulgences and hired Giotto to decorate the chapel from floor to ceiling. It was a desperate, superstitious struggle of a man who believed he could negotiate his salvation through art and architecture.
Giotto's revolution, from golden icons to raw emotion.
However, Giotto was not an artist who simply catered to the whims of his patron. He was a revolutionary who stripped away the flat, golden, and lifeless symbolism of the Middle Ages. Before Giotto, figures in paintings were mere icons, floating in an eternal, emotionless void. Giotto changed everything. He introduced volume, space, and most importantly, raw human emotion. He made the biblical stories breathe with the weight of real life. In the scene of the cleansing of the temple, Giotto focuses on a human anger far more intense than what is recorded in the scriptures. While a whip is a tool for driving out animals, a fist is an explosion of emotion carrying a conscious human will. As the British biblical scholar J.B. Phillips confessed after a lifetime of study, we must confront the radical truth hidden behind the image of a gentle Jesus. Jesus was warm and compassionate, but he was also capable of a terrifying righteous fury. He was not a passive figure, he was a challenger of corrupt systems.
The den of thieves, corruption clad in holiness.
The Temple of Jerusalem at that time was far from a house of prayer. It was the marketplace of Annas the high priest. Temple leaders exploited the devotion of the poor through a sophisticated system of currency exchange. They claimed that Roman coins were secular and dirty, forcing pilgrims to exchange them for temple currency at exorbitant rates. This was a clever mechanism to suck the lifeblood of impoverished Judeans who had already suffered under centuries of occupation. Beyond exchange rates, they controlled the sacrificial system itself. Every animal brought for sacrifice had to be inspected for a fee, and almost none passed the test. This forced the poor to buy certified animals from temple-sanctioned sellers at inflated prices. History records that the price of a pair of pigeons, the only offering the poorest could afford, once soared to the price of a gold coin. The sacred system had become a predatory business, designed to fatten the pockets of the religious elite. Giotto connected this ancient corruption with his own era. He saw the same greed in the eyes of the moneylenders of Padua and the leaders of the 14th century church, who secretly collaborated with them for profit.
The message of the fist, restoring the essence of faith.
The Jesus throwing a punch in Giotto's painting asks us a haunting question today. Are we ignoring the pain of the poor while hiding behind the modern gospel of success, prosperity, and positive thinking? In a world where the church is often dominated by the logic of capital, are we truly speaking of God's justice? The modern church might be delivering a message inferior to that of a 14th century painter. When the size of a donation becomes a measure of grace and corporate logic replaces the sacrificial love of the gospel, we must summon Giotto's Jesus once again. We need the Jesus who clenches his fist against hypocrisy. We need to tear down the walls of hatred and discrimination to become a bridge of reconciliation where love and justice can finally flow. That is the essence of Christianity that Giotto tried to convey through that fist. It is the narrow path that leads not to a comfortable religion, but to the greatest glory. Are you ready to walk that path today?